Mich. I'm Pauline Suaco-Juan. I'm currently the executive director for the Center of International Trade, Expositions and Missions, which is an agency of the Department of Trade and Industry. We're responsible for export promotion through trade shows in, I guess, the old world. So in this new world, where we've pioneered digital marketing. So we put up five different um, promotion and lead generations platform in during the pandemic. So in the last 2 years, um, to act as the marketing vehicles for our signature shows, in which is Fame or Fame Plus for the home fashion and lifestyle industry. We have two for food, which is called IFEX Connect for the trade, and then we do Food Philippines for the content and community. That's the promotions platform, and then we have Create Philippines, which aggregates information, and then we're currently working on a directory for the creative sector. And then we have SSX, or the Sustainability Solutions Exchange, which aims to bring together all the different stakeholders in the sustainability sector. So it aims to be like a sourcing platform for companies and suppliers and people who want to learn more about sustainability.
If you could tell us
Okay.
about your experience in publishing.
Before I joined government, I was the editor in chief of Preview Magazine for almost 16 years. So back then, we were the best-selling fashion magazine in the Philippines. So I was also the founding editor of the website. Right now, it's called preview.ph, but when we started, it was called Style Bible .ph. And then I was also the editor when we started coverage of using social media channels. So and then, well, that was up to about 2015 when I retired from that first job, from that first career.
It's so great. It's so crazy because you have such a big, like, range of skills now, from broadcasting to now publishing, and then now government. But
Well, broadcasting, I started with Pro Productions prior to, at one point in my life. So I did broadcast journalism really, and we used to produce travel documentaries. But actually, I kind of have it all in my head that the I guess the divide isn't really so big, because I realized that the thing I really liked to do was tell the story of Philippine creative talent, whether it was as a producer for television and Probe, and then most definitely when I was at the magazine and at the website, the best part of the job was really seeking out young creatives, whether it be photographers or designers and so on and so forth, and shining the light on their potential and their talent. And then CITEM just happened to be a different medium, so to speak, because it was really an exhibition. So it was the exhibitions industry. So whereas it was like pretty flat, right, two-dimensional in terms of the content that you had to produce in publishing, this was really in real life. And then I guess fortunately, when the pandemic struck, and then when we had to pivot to digital, it became two-dimensional again, in the sense that the content was up on a website. So I really think there's a tie in terms of how parang
the
in
condition,
terms of the, yeah, in terms of the content anyway, that I've been producing throughout my entire career.
great. So, for those who are from the UK who are not really familiar with Manila Fame, maybe we can talk about it as a physical space that people would come and visit, and then perhaps you can also tell us about how was that meant to pivot to digital initially, or was that triggered by the
Mhm.
pandemic, or was it already in the plans of CITEM
Yeah.
prior?
Well, Manila Fame is the one of the longest running trade shows in Asia. Actually, it was established in 1983, so we've had more than 70 editions of Manila Fame. So it's actually the Creative Economy Council of the Philippines uses Manila Fame in its as an example of how government can actually actively help the creative sector, because it's really one example of being able to market and sell the skills of a particular, or the crafts of a particular sector. And in this case, it was the furniture, the home and furniture, and to a certain extent the fashion sector in its peak, right? In the late 80s and the 90s, before the advent of manufacturing in China and before China opened up, the Philippines was really the destination for a lot of the for a lot of companies, home fashion and companies worldwide, in terms of sourcing. So through when China opened, I think uh, the volume in terms of exports decreased, um, because obviously it's cheaper to sell in China. Uh, 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 China sells much cheaper products, and then so what we've been struggling now, of course, the pivot of the Philippines was to not compete in terms of the products that China makes, churns out, but we decided to go more high end, more artisan, which is really the strength of our community of manufacturers anyway. But so in doing this, obviously, um, we've been having quite like a chicken and an egg problem in the last decade or so, because the show has gotten smaller and smaller. Because obviously, when people discovered that they could source online, um, then the whole and retail budgets were cut as a consequence, right? So you didn't have as much buyers who would come in the Philippines. Um, so that there was that conundrum, right? So will there be more exhibitors if you have more buyers, or vice versa? And so one way out of that is to really find a new way to begin to find new buyers, or to expose more people to the stuff that our or the goods that our producers, our companies were making. And so when I actually applied to the Department of Trade, um, it was using my experience in publishing, and I was saying, we really need to get our manufacturers online. And so this prior to the pandemic, and I got in 2018, so we had a year of laying down the groundwork, doing, pitching the idea to the board, getting the buy-in of our the government regulations agencies, the buy-in of the Department of Budget and Management, getting the buy-in of uh, the Commission on Audit. So after we had, and then of course we had to put like the initial designs, the architecture. So we had to do the architecture of the site, and the we had to pre-plan everything with the Department of Trade and Industry. So that one really took more than a year to get all the permits, to get the concurrence of everybody involved. And then we were just starting to draft the terms of reference for the first website, which is the fameplus.com, or the website for the home fashion and lifestyle sector, when the pandemic struck. So because it was pandemic and all the physical shows had canceled, we realized that this was an opportunity to use the budget, because we're government, and so the budgets were already in place. So to use those budgets and to begin to build the other digital platforms for the other signatures shows that we did. What we also did was to um, because the overall strategy is to really pivot into digital marketing as well. And then so we realized early on that even if we built the platforms, and actually that was our problem when we first pitched the platform, is that even if we did build it, how would we populate the website or the platform with content, right? So in the initial business plan, we didn't have the money. We were just crossing our fingers that user generated content could be used, and people would upload their photographs onto the site, which wasn't the case because and fortunately, because of the pandemic, we were able to have a budget. So what we did was really um, produce a lot of the content ourselves and then seed that into the website. So we have a an editorial component, so that this one really increases our visibility, our searchability online. And then we have digital storefronts, which we also produced the pictures and the and the text for. So we and then after that we went around and got funding from different agencies to help our exporters produce the content that they need for their digital storefront. So basically that's the show, the short story.
But how did it translate, Pauline, from the because there's a physicality to Manila Fame, right? You want to see
Hmm.
the product, you want to like, see how it's made, given that it's all about craft and artisanal production.
Yeah.
How did you translate that into digital, and was it effective in terms of sales? Like, um, I know like maybe for example, you can expound like, so did it go fully digital the the fair, and we're like, how was the purchasing, and how did that what were the results of it versus the actual physical space?
Well, we put up a promotions and lead generations platform. So and the main objective for that is to become more searchable online. That you're because most of the buyers, or once upon a time when Manila Fame was first founded, the buyers would really have to go to the physical trade show to find out what's new. Nowadays, buyers Google even before they get to the trade show. As a matter of fact, they Google, put together like a lookbook of sorts, and then that's the reference that they use with their buying teams when they go around the trade floor. So the habits have really changed. So we figured that even before we decided which overseas trade fairs we would go and participate in, the very, very first place we needed to be found was on the different search engines, on Google, right? So, what this told us is that we needed to produce content that would make us searchable. So, and that's why we put up um, uh, a sort of like a mini magazine. Our sites do that. And so where we used to spend on um production design and having to like build your exhibitions and your sets, now we spend on the content. So the production design goes into the photos that we produce. And because online fantastic photographs really is the one is what makes your buyer or your audience stop right when they're scrolling through Facebook or through whatever channel that they're on. So that's what we primarily use. And then is that we have a lot of content, and the text that we use has to be really um uh keyword search engine friendly. So the critical score of the text that we put in has to be Google friendly or search engine SEO friendly. So when you look at our data right now, I think nearly half comes from organic search, which means when people type in certain keywords, at least Manila Fame or Fame Plus comes out. So, and when you look at the data that we have, more and more we're getting at least new buyers. Half of the buyers that are onboarded into the platform now are new. So for our exhibitors, at least that's good news for them, because once you've made, you've engaged and made the relationship with a buyer, you're kind of expected to keep that, right? So you go to trade fairs so that you get new leads. And so that's what we're really been working hard at. So we're at the point right now where that's our main concern, is really just to be able to deliver new buyers to the exhibitors. You can't act there's no you cannot um finalize a sale on the platform. It wasn't worth we didn't have that much budget to be able to create like an end-to-end platform. Plus, we also didn't know if this was something that our exhibitors wanted. So right now, there's no demand for it. So
Mm.
what normal also, because a lot of the stuff that we have on our website, a lot of our goods is, and that's the strength of the Philippines, is really they're able to customize it for their buyers.
Yeah.
So it's not e-commerce in the sense that
Mm.
I buy this and then I load it up into the cart. A lot of it really will go through some form of tweaking, so that it's according to the buyer's specification. So that's really also hard to manage on an e-commerce site, right? So what happens is that there needs to be some kind of a discussion between the buyer and the exhibitor in order to um, uh, talk about the product tweaks, and then to negotiate the price as well. So what we've also seen happen on our platform is that it's really just it's also at this point in time a gateway to our exhibitors, because sometimes the engagement happens on social media, and then they click and then find the digital storefronts, contact them, and then the conversation happens on instant messaging like WhatsApp or Viber, and then it culminates in email after they're able to formalize a transaction, bring forward a quote, and then and then they're paid, and then they can bill that way. And then you just send the details that the bank payment was made, and then so it happens on different ways. So also because um well, don't know if I should say this in this form, but because it's a government site, ay
Yeah.
wag ko na lang, yeah. So um we some exhibitors prefer to have it offline, right?
Yeah.
So we didn't really also want um that's why we didn't know if there was a need for the whole
Yeah.
um fulfillment and all that. Plus, it's also really difficult
Yeah.
to um to design and to plan. So that's probably down the line
Yeah.
if there's a need for it from our so right now what happens is if they have we have consolidators that are our partners. So if there's a need for that, we just link our exhibitors there. If they are more adept at or at e-commerce, we also have different e-commerce sites which we can link to their digital storefronts, and then those actually bring them straight to their product pages. So that's kind of how we deal with it now. In terms of sales, um, we there's not a lot of sales yet, but you have to know the sales that the exhibitors report back are also not audited. So we really don't know if they're under declaring or over declaring
Yeah.
what it is, because even in a physical trade show anyway, sales isn't really the barometer. It's really lead generation, also because we realize that from the moment the leads are delivered, between that time and when the sales culminates, there's so many different factors that could come in that could affect the sales. So you have shipping, taxes, among the very the other things, customer service impacts also. So those are things that diba, that SITEM really has no direct effect on. It's really between the suppliers and the um, exhibitors and the buyers.
Okay. And then just quickly, Pauline, do you think that so at this point you haven't reconciled if the people who are going on the site have all been, I mean, has there been a physical fame yet since?
No,
Not yet.
no.
But so you'll only be able to recognize that when that happens, no?
Yeah,
Um
in our food show,
yeah,
the sales are nowhere near the uh the physical show, but that's because it's food,
food.
right?
Yeah,
So
of
you need
course.
to taste something. So if you're a new buyer, it's totally out of the question to put in all that order online. So in food, what we get are um orders. So with home fashion and lifestyle, what happens is that they can send the samples separately. So we do a lot of B2B meetings, just so that there's some sort of face-to-face interaction. And so the servicing, instead of just the digital storefront where you're just clicking on products, if you need to talk to the owner or the merchant, then we really facilitate this kind of interaction between, and then we work with the trade posts a lot also. So, and like, um right now we have an engagement with FOBAP, which is like the Foreign Buyers Association of the Philippines.
Yeah.
So they bring together, they have buyers, and they ask with certain needs, and then we try to match them with our exhibitors. So it's been more active that way. So the marketing has also changed so that we're active in certain groups. For example, the interior design groups. So now there's really more a concerted effort to try to set up B2B meetings um, with the sector.
Pauline, I'm gonna ask you a little bit about Create Philippines because I think
Mm-hmm.
that's the first the first time that you've actually consolidated a list of creatives, right? That's
Yeah.
searchable. Yeah, maybe you can just tell us a little bit about that project, why it came about. As there's so many different creative industries that are part of it, right? From architecture, advertising,
Yeah.
industrial design,
Yeah.
everything. So that's
But
interesting in the context of this, that to be able to move that digitally.
Create Philippines, I think the first one was in about 2017 when CITEM produced its first Create Philippines. And it was really because the Department of Trade and Industry had realized that the Philippines has such a wealth of creatives, and then that this would be the next sunrise industry. Um, uh, so but when we were doing it, it was really more creative talks. And then when I came in, um, we were focusing on certain sectors only. So the priority sectors of the DTI at that time went through game development, communication design, animation, um, and so there were six, no, and so on and so forth. But we realized that, oh my gosh, if we're going to go through these one by one, and there are so many domains, by the time we had, you went back to the first one, so it was useless. So that model was untenable. So we were inspired by South by Southwest. We were hoping to do like a more festival type of approach, which we were set to mount in 2018. Um, we had plans then. We were working with the DOT to do like a mini festival within Intramuros, which is like a historical walled city. There are universities in there and other creative agencies that work within that particular area. But the pandemic came, so we were never able to implement that. And but what happened also during the pandemic was through the initiative of Congress and Congressman Christopher de Venecia. They had filed the Creative Industries Development Act, and we were part of the group that would meet almost every week, every Thursdays, and in fact to like talk to the different sectors and see what they needed. And um, we in the beginning we just really wanted to do a site that would aggregate the different information coming from the creative sectors. But what came about during those congressional hearings was that it really the industry, the different sectors itself was asking that there be like a directory where you could search its members. So we just merged the two things. So we are right now in just beginning we to populate the website with creative. So I as of today I think we have about 120 something um creatives on board. So that's well, the potential is like
Huge.
limitless, right? Because there's like thousands upon thousands of workers within this sector. So we're also working out the kinks of the site. So at this point we have a couple of problems with regards to registration. So we're working that out. So but phase two of the site, from being just a regular directory, so right now you can go online, search it, and then you'll just see their portfolio. So hopefully by the end of the year we'll start programming, and it becomes more like a storefront, which is similar to what you see on the Fame and IFEX websites, wherein they'll be able to they'll be able to have like a storefront for their own services, and then all the different engagements with your buyers can be recorded in one account. So that's the eventual evolution of the storefront of Create Philippines.
But I didn't know about the South by Southwest thing. That's so interesting. And I wanted to like just expound on
Do
like
you know why? Because South by Southwest, we figured um all is well to have conferences, but creatives need a fun environment, right? So in order to get them more engaged, it has to be a festival. It can't just be a conference. So the, that's why we were hoping to work with the Department of Tourism so that they could like kind of create the festival where the conference happens, right? So ultimately we're hoping that eventually it evolves to that. But the festival in itself, the conference in itself, is envisioned to be a place where the creatives and policymakers and the different stakeholders of the education and all that of the industry are able to meet together and then exchange ideas. So um, we just applied that to the digital conference also.
I guess I wanted to relate that to obstacles of going
Mm,
fully digital and online. Like for example, was I guess you can answer the different obstacles in both Fame and Fame Plus
great.
and Create. Um, because I feel like they both have, yeah, well, my outtake, what I got from that was that there's still the importance of a physical space, right? Like
Yeah.
for Fame, as a person who utilizes suppliers and uses, in terms of design, I want to touch and feel the product. And in
Mm-mm.
terms of Create, there's that obstacle of like creating real opportunities for meeting each other. So Are there any, like, for example, if you can talk about that and perhaps any other obstacles that came about in the transition to digital, and like what specific platforms you use? Not like, for example, was it YouTube or was it a website? Was it
Mm.
just to outline for those who are not completely familiar?
Oh my gosh, this is such a long, complicated ask.
Oh, sorry.
No, no. The obstacles really, because we're government, right? Um, and this was the first project that we had, um, in terms of being digital.
Yeah.
So digitalization. So the number one, the very first one was really internal. It was really convincing CITEM itself. Like everybody knew that that we had to go digital, but they just nobody knew what it entailed. So especially, um, you have to realize that 30% of CITEM's workforce has been there 30 years or longer. So these are really not digital natives. So the idea of digitalization was really something that they said, okay, I want to do, but they didn't have the bandwidth to do. So um that initial round was really so that initial digitalization effort was a test of patience, to say the least. Because when we started doing it with operations, and this was the pandemic had already struck by then. Everybody was sort of doing it because they just thought, oh, after 2 months, when the pandemic ends, we can go back to normal. And then when they realized that the pandemic was so it was met with a lot of resistance, but after 2 months when they realized, oh my gosh, this is going to take much longer, I think we got better engagement and from them in terms of the buy-in to really go digital. Because it afterwards we realized we couldn't just train operations, because when we drafted the first terms of reference, we realized that we had not trained the bids and awards committee. And so the people who were bidding it, who were all really much older, were sitting there and they didn't know how to evaluate. They didn't know how to award basically the contracts because they didn't know what kind of right. So the beginning was really that. And then when we got the platform built, it was we realized that the stakeholders itself. So you, particularly for the ones who live in the regions, we were plagued with poor bandwidth, poor internet. And then secondly is that the capacity to do things online. So when we started onboarding exhibitors, it was really a case of our project officers, our exhibitions team, sitting down on Zoom and saying, this is how you upload a presentation on Zoom. Press share screen. This so it and remember, this is a pandemic, so you really had to do all this capacity building online. All the product development was done online. So it was like learning a whole new language to get people engaged. And nobody had any content. You'll be surprised. Even the most seasoned exporters were weren't doing it. So then we had to produce the photos at the height of the pandemic. So um the I think and up to now, I think everybody realizes what needs to be done for digital marketing. They don't have a point person to do it. So very few companies are actually actively engaged in producing the content that you need so that you can do digital marketing correctly. So what happens now is that um, uh, they produce intermittently, um, and another thing that we had to sort of and we're still repeating this particular spiel is on repeat, is because when you're marketing on social media, you really try to go in favor with the algorithms, which means you got to like a lot, you got to comment a lot, you got to share a lot, and you try to build that community. Whereas in the physical sense, in the old, you exhibitors sort of wanted to be really protective. This is my buyer. I don't want to share him or her with you, right? So you tried to keep your calling cards close to your chest. Whereas in digital marketing, it's really the opposite, right? You all help one another so that you can reach a bigger audience. And so this is something that we constantly have to keep repeating in our capacity building, that guys, you have to like, you have to comment, because we call it I, I, there's not an English term for it. We call it the digital bayanihan, which means bayanihan is like a local custom wherein neighbors help one another when you're like it comes from moving house, right? So in the olden days, what people would do is that they each would like carry the house on their shoulders, because the old huts, right? And then they would move from one place to another if you were going to move, or everybody would help construct a new house, which is so this is what you really need to do, except in a digital way. So the way we explain it is that, this is my influence, or this is my network in terms of digital. um, is everybody, if I have a pail of water and I throw it, everybody that gets wet is part of my network. But whoever you throw, you when you throw your pail, some of the people who are wet from mine will feel the it, but there are people who aren't. So at the end of the day, all 300 of us exhibitors, that's who our algorithms favor, right? So that's the whole span of our community, of our influence. So the more the merrier, and the more times you engage, the more times you comment, the more times you post, the more times you share, the bigger that um the bigger the more the search engine find you, right? So the Philippines is a social media capital of the world, and we're really very good at this in terms of social our social media, but we don't harness this business wise.
Mhm.
So that's another mindset that we kind of have to. So eventually, right now, we're still heavily subsidizing through our funding partners like Phil Export, the content of our exhibitors. But hopefully, as we go along, it will just be like in the physical show, wherein producing content is the same thing as I need to shoot because I have to produce my brochure. But so now you need to produce your content so that you have something to put on your Facebook, on your Instagram, on your digital platforms, and your storefront, and so on and so forth. So it's been an exercise really trying to get um, the MSMEs, or the entrepreneurs, or the companies that we have um, into this framework. So when we have B2Bs, for example, what normally happens, uh, half of the we had as much as half who will say, "Oh, I can't make," who will decline because they don't have anyone savvy enough. They don't have a digital marketing person. So the need also to transform their operations is something paramount in terms of our exhibitors. So that was the difficulty. Create Philippines, on the other hand, is a more digital, certain parts of it, because there are 24 domains. um, Certain parts, certain sectors are really more digital savvy. So when we put up the first Create Philippines last year, we put it up. We built the platforms, but when we do our digital events, we do it on Hopin. Um, And because we feel the interface is really the most conducive to putting in a digital expo. As a matter of fact, we went from um, just y- buying a subscription. So now, because we're actually, I forget what the term is, consultants to hop in as well, because we use the platform so much. And so there are the my exhibitions team has done so many workarounds the current interface. So what we've done in the last Manila Fame, for example, is to link the platform Fame to the expo portion of Hopin. So we're able to, if you go to our digital events now, you're able to really run down, scroll down, and see the digital storefronts on Hopin. And then when they click, they go to either the website or their digital storefronts on Fame Plus. So and then we've managed to put in the webinars and in different session rooms different iterations of like multimedia content, so that we have viewing rooms for films or for and not just webinars, to keep people engaged. So um in Create Philippines, we realized that um, a lot of the when we first did Fame, it was like literally a step by step process. Also, Hopin has a networking function on the platform, wherein buyers and sellers can just go into a networking room, and so you can DM one another, and then there's, I think, about 3 minutes where you and I can do a telecon with video open, and then I can just meet you. So in Create Philippines, I guess because more users are digital natives, they, without prompting, they just use the network function. So in that sense, you're really able to meet new people, because once you're in that networking room, I can just like message you, Mitch, and then we can have a 3-minute conversation. I can give you my details, and that's it. It's sort of like approaching somebody in cocktails. So so I guess it really depends on the sector. In the sustainability solutions, also, that one was, they people were also able to use the networking function, but not as much as Create, wherein it we the engagements were really more than we expected. So on the food platform, for example, nobody uses it because because they're really not keen on like I guess meeting strangers online. So but we realize that because there's a networking function, we have to be able to identify people better on the chat, on um, as participants. So that one we're working on, so that you can, it's sort of like an ID, so you can tell if you're a buyer or an exhibitor, so that when you go to the networking functions, it's easier to like, oh, I want to talk to that him because it's a buyer. But when you scroll over, you can kind of see a basic bio. So unlike in a physical show, right, when you just see the ID that says buyer, this one you can kind of, oh, okay, which and then you can search on LinkedIn on the side. So those are like the differences when you're conducting it online versus when you do it on site. So
Great. Wow, Pauline, that's so good. I learned so much. But I guess to end, maybe you can talk about like what do you think is next? I mean, obviously, like it's the end of your, but how do you think it's going to carry over and progress from what it is now?
I think we still need better content. It's still something that we're working on, is to get the right content mix. So truth be told, I'm not super happy with the content that I think it could be more engaging for the exhibitors. It really also needs to be more focused rather than on, let's say, the way we do it now is what do we want, what is the strategic goals. So um um rather, so I think what it should really be market driven or exhibitor driven. What is the current inventory that our exhibitors have? So that's the kind of story. So it's really a lot to do with trying to um make better content and how to distribute this better. And then at the end of the day, what we really need to fix right now is internally. CITEM needs change management, because obviously the institution, the agency is built to handle physical events. So we want to be more flat, more agile. So that's a lot of um, restructuring the company so that uh, we can service it better now that there are four different shows, and then there's a physical and then an online platform. So a lot of the work has to be done there that way. So eh, it's really um, back end to make the services better. So we have areas also wherein we're not 100% digitalized, because we're waiting for certain platforms, for example, in terms of accounting and all that. Because to be truly digital, all your processes need to be. So there are certain platforms that are not yet available to us. So it's just to have to get the whole 360, like the payment gateways are not completely integrated in the API of the site. So um uh stuff like that. So there's a lot, and it's really about managing and running it. And then of course getting more on the exhibitor side, it's community building, because obviously a bigger, more robust community um, really helps in with digital marketing.